Okay, hi. I just finished reading part one of Goethe's Faust, and I wanted to make a video about it. I don't know anybody who has read Faust, and none of my friends want to read Faust, so I wanted to make a video to talk about it and what I liked about it, and share just a couple things that, a couple of the quotes and passages that I really enjoyed from it. The whole purpose of this channel, I'm making it to kind of just talk about what I want to talk about, and that's usually books that no one I know has read. So I'm recording this at an eye-melting 480p. So this book, if you don't know about Faust, is about a guy named Faust, who has studied pretty much everything there was to study at the time in Germany, and he feels no closer to understanding anything about the universe or existence or humanity. He's still unhappy and unsatisfied, so he essentially turns to black magic. He summons spirits and eventually comes in contact with the devil, Mephistopheles, who then makes a bargain with him. He essentially bargains his soul away in search of divine knowledge and satisfaction. And the reason I read this book, or chose to read this book, is because it's been referenced in so many other things. It's a cornerstone of Western literature, and so I really wanted to actually experience it for myself. And so I got it. This is only part one. I do have to read part two still, and I need to find a copy of it, but all in due time, I guess. So a couple things before I start just going through the quotes I chose. This is not going to be like a formal review or anything, or even like a structured analysis. Like I said, I just picked some stuff that I liked, and I want to talk about it. So I'll be analyzing those quotes, but not really. This isn't like a Spark Notes type video. Another thing is that if you're interested in reading Faust, or really any kind of classic literature, my first advice would just be don't be afraid of it, because it's old. I'm not a literature major. I don't have a degree or anything. I just really like reading and literature and stuff. So I took a lot of notes, and some of my notes were just like, I don't know what's going on in this scene. And I definitely used a study guide as well online. So yeah, if you're interested in trying to read something but you feel like you're not smart enough, I say do it anyway. Either look for help or don't. Just experience it as you experience it. And yeah, I think everybody can get something out of classic literature. I will also put a couple videos in the description, or links, I guess, to other channels that I watched that helped me kind of get a foothold and dive into this book. So this is a very old edition. It's got some beautiful illustrations. This is the Bayard-Taylor translation. I really love the illustrations, but Harry Clark did the illustrations, but the translation itself, Bayard-Taylor, is very antiquated and baroque, and I would not recommend it for your first time through Faust. It was my first time through Faust, and I really enjoyed the language, but the translation made it a bit difficult to parse some of the scenes. So I've heard good things about the David Luke translation, so if you want to get into Faust, that I guess is where you should start. It's not with this one. But like I said, the language is very pretty, and it was definitely still worth reading. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and start getting into the quotes. And the first one I chose was the beginning of the first chapter. There's a prelude and a prologue. The prologue is where Faust or not Faust, Mephistopheles talks to God, and God allows him to test Faust. God says, Faust is a good servant, he won't go against me, and Mephistopheles basically says, we'll see about that. It's a lot like the story of Job in the Bible. But I didn't mark any quotes from that section, so we're gonna skip over it. So the first quote, also there's just more of these illustrations. The first quote I chose was the first quote of chapter 1. It's maybe the most famous passage in the book. And this is, like I said, the Bayard-Taylor translation of that scene. It says, I've studied now philosophy and jurisprudence, medicine, and even, alas, theology, from end to end with labor keen. And here, poor fool, with all my lore, I stand no wiser than before. I'm magister, yea, doctor hight, and straight or crosswise, wrong or right. These 10 years long with many woes, I've led my scholars by the nose, and see that nothing can be known. That knowledge cuts me to the bone. So, I mean, this is our first introduction to Faust as a character, and it kind of lays it all out on the table for you. He studied everything and essentially achieved nothing. Nothing can be known. That knowledge cuts me to the bone. I've related to that a lot. I mean, I don't know anyone who hasn't searched for the answers of the universe and realized that after years of toil and effort, they're no closer than before. So the next quote, I mean, this whole monologue's really powerful, but the next part I marked was over here, where it says, let's see, and do I ask wherefore my heart falters, oppressed with unknown needs, why some inexplicable smart all movement of my life impedes? Alas, in living nature's stead, where God his human creature set, in smoke and mold the fleshless dead, and bones of beasts surround me yet. Here I think Faust is just talking about his fear of death, and his fear of, one day disappearing and there being no trace of him. In smoke and mold the fleshless dead. He's in this dark, dim study, and he is afraid to die without having achieved anything or felt true happiness. So we're going to move on, I think. Let's see what's next. Okay. So this next part, Faust has summoned a spirit successfully to his study, and I think I marked the spirit's little speech to him just because I really liked the language of it. He says, in the tides of life, in action's storm, a fluctuant wave, a shuttle free, birth and the grave, an eternal sea. Let me get that on camera. A weaving, flowing, life all glowing, thus at times humming loom, 'tis my hand prepares the garment of life which the deity wears. And here Faust has summoned the spirit and said to the spirit, I am thy peer. Basically, I'm the same as you. He's reaching for divinity. And the spirit responds basically saying, I'm the one who weaves God's robes. He's saying you're nothing like me. And that's said even more explicitly on the next page, but the spirit says, thou art like the spirit which thou comprehendest, not me. First of all, just beautiful prose, and this is kind of where the antiquity of the translation shines through, as more poetic sections like this, I think. Thus at times humming loom, 'tis my hand prepares the garment of life which the deity wears. I just think that's a beautiful phrase, but it's also it's really intimidating, how Faust has summoned the spirit which weaves God's robes into his study, It gives a great sense of weight to the forces he's messing with. Alright. Moving on. Also, all these tags are color-coded. That kind of happened by accident. I just had these colors available, but green is stuff that Faust says. Red will be Mephistopheles. Orange is miscellaneous characters. And then blue is Gretchen or Margaret, who we'll be introduced to later on. So this is still Faust. I believe this is still chapter 1, or scene 1. Here he's talking about his study and how restrictive it feels. It says, let me get that on camera. Is not this dust, these walls within them hold, the 100 shelves which cramp and chain me, the frippery, the trinkets thousandfold, that in this mothy den restrain me? Here shall I find the help I need? Here shall 1,000 volumes teach me only that men, self-tortured, everywhere must bleed, and here and there one happy man sits lonely. I think here Faust has some measure of self-awareness. There's scenes later on where he's outside and talking to people, and he actually feels a great deal of happiness when he's among other people. But here he's almost realizing that his kind of imprisonment in his study, his dedication to learning everything that can be learned, is self-imposed. He shall hear 1,000 volumes teach me only that men self-tortured everywhere must bleed. The search in itself is one of the things that's preventing him from finding the happiness he seeks. And here he seems to realize that, but has no power to change his actions. Let's see. This one's next. So this is what I was talking about, where he's now out amongst the town with the people, and let's see, where do I want to start? Where is it? Okay. Okay. From the low dark rooms, scarce habitable, from the bonds of work, from trade's restriction, from the pressing weight of roof and gable, from the narrow crushing streets and alleys, from the church's solemn and reverent night, all come forth to the cheerful light. How lively see the multitude sallies, scattering through gardens and fields remote, while over the river, that broadly dallies, dances so many a festive boat. And overladen nigh to sinking, the last full wherry takes the stream. Yonder afar from the hill paths blinking, their clothes are colors that softly gleam. I hear the noise of the village even. Here is the people's proper heaven. Here high and low contented see. Here I am man, dare man to be. So, like I mentioned earlier, this is where Faust is out there seeing people, seeing them escaping from their daily lives into a joyful kind of celebration of shared humanity. And Faust even recognizes that. He feels it. Here high and low contented see. Here I am man, dare man to be. He's saying, in this moment, he seems to say, I'm okay with being human. I'm okay with my limitations, because look at how joyful humanity is. But that doesn't last very long. He keeps going back to this notion of what does it matter if I have a moment's joy? I still don't know anything. I'm still powerless. But I just, again, just the language of it is beautiful. I think it's a really touching passage he has among these people. Yeah, and I've felt that too, definitely. Just being among people and feeling like, this is what it's all about. And honestly, if we wanted this to not be a tragedy, we could end the book right here. Faust has found his meaning among people, and But unfortunately, obviously, that's not the way it goes. Excuse me. Sorry. I'm not very good at flipping through this. Okay. Yeah, and this one I marked, I think, was just this short little part right here. Faust says, "Oh, happy he who still renews the hope from error's deeps to rise forever. That which one does not know one needs to use, and what one knows one uses never." So he's talking to Wagner, who is I believe, a student of his, and he's saying, I wish I was one of those people who could go through all these mistakes and come back up still full of hope. But he says, I'm not. He says that, that which one does not know, one needs to use. One knows, one uses never. He's again disparaging the value of his own education. He just doesn't see any value of it. He's saying, I know everything I don't need to know and do not know what I need to know. So, I just kind of like that phrase, but it's just more of Faust being down on himself and down on the world. So here we have our first red marker, our first Mephistopheles quote. And you'll know, if you know anything about, if you grew up Christian or especially Catholic, you'll notice so many biblical allusions in this book. So Mephistopheles says up here, when Faust is saying, "Who are you?" And Mephistopheles explains just what he is. He says, "I am the spirit that denies, and justly so, for all things from the void called forth deserve to be destroyed. 'Twere better then were not created. Thus, all which you as sin have rated, destruction aught with evil blent, that is my proper element." Faust says, "Thou namest thyself a part, yet showest complete to me." Mephistopheles responds, "The modest truth I speak to thee. If man that microcosmic fool can see himself a whole so frequently, part of the part am I, once all, in primal night, part of the darkness which brought forth the light, the haughty light which now disputes the space, and claims of Mother Night her ancient place." It goes on from there, obviously, but again, going back to, if you know anything about Catholicism, evil is just the lack of God, right? If God is all good and all knowing, or if he's, love, perfection, good, then evil could only necessarily be the absence of that God. And so Mephistopheles is, in the role of the devil, is the spirit that denies, saying all things deserve to be destroyed. He's saying there's nothing worth saving about this existence. And to me, that was just a very interesting nod to Catholicism, and I believe other Christian branches. I grew up Catholic, so I don't know as much about other branches of Christianity, but what's also really interesting is that Mephistopheles down here, he refers to darkness as primal night. Darkness was here first. He's saying that light has no place in darkness's home, Mother Night, her ancient place. Darkness was here first, and it's in darkness that all things belong. That's his kind of opinion on things. And we'll see a little later, well, actually a lot later towards the end of this book, why he might feel that way. And I think that's interesting too, that the devil has a reason for feeling the way he does. And people may disagree with me, but like I said, we'll get there later on. But for now, he's just this kind of negation of good. That is what evil is to him and to Goethe. Okay, I have another one marked here. I believe I just liked the language here. Oh yeah, this is what it was. The something of this clumsy world has yet, with all that I have undertaken, not been by me disturbed or shaken. From earthquake, tempest, wave, volcano's brand, back into quiet settle sea and land. And that damned stuff, the bestial human brood, what use in having that to play with? How many have I made away with? And ever circulates a newer, fresher blood. It makes me furious, such things beholding. From water, earth, and air unfolding, 1,000 germs break forth and grow, in dry and wet and warm and chilly. And had I not the flame reserved, why really, there's nothing special of my own to show. Another thing Goethe does a lot in this book is reaffirm the sovereignty of good and the powerlessness of the devil. So Mephistopheles here is complaining. He's saying, all that I've done, after all that I've done and worked to destroy, life keeps coming. That from water, earth, and air unfolding, 1,000 germs break forth and grow. He's talking about the tenacity of life, the impossibility of destroying life. And that's kind of a huge theme in this book, is that, no matter how much the forces of evil work to destroy life, it's kind of a pointless endeavor, because life itself is self-perpetuating. And there's even historically and prehistorically, all the extinction events have failed to extinguish life from this planet. So again, the powerlessness of evil and Goethe's affirmation of the power of God or goodness. Let's see, what's next? Another Faust quote. So here, Faust is, I believe, so he's, they brought up his brief, him and Mephistopheles, the topic came up of his brief joy when he was with all the people. He's saying, again, what does it matter? Because everything terrible in my life outweighs the good. And he's saying, cursed be the glare of apparition that on the finer sense intrudes. Cursed be the lying dream's impression of name and fame and laureled brow. Cursed all that flatters as possession, as wife and child, as knave and plough. Cursed mammon be when he with treasures to restless action spurs our fate. Cursed when for soft indulgent leisures he lays for us the pillows straight. Cursed be the vine's transcendent nectar, the highest favor love lets fall. Cursed also hope, cursed faith the spectre, and cursed be patience most of all. So he's essentially cursing all the little good things and the virtues in life that have led him to keep going so long. And down here, the spirits say, woe, woe, that thou hast it destroyed, the beautiful world with powerful fist. By Faust, like Mephistopheles, negating the good of his life and his virtues. That, negation is destruction. Again, another reference to Catholic or Christian scripture. They mention faith, hope, and love here. And one of the verses, it's not the Beatitudes. Faith, hope, and love, the greatest of these is love. It's from the Bible, and this is kind of an inversion on that. It's, the Bible is affirming these values as godly, and Faust is saying, curse these values. Okay, moving on. I don't think I said that very well, but maybe someone, if anyone watches this, can clarify my thoughts. Okay, another Mephistopheles. Here he just says to Faust, why, on the whole, thou art what thou art. Set wigs of million curls upon thy head to raise thee, where shoes an ell in height the truth betrays thee, and thou remainest what thou art. So Faust throughout this book has been striving for divinity, and Mephistopheles, after they made their bargain, he's still playing with him. He's saying, basically, you're a fool to try and be anything other than human. You are what you are. And this argument continues. And Mephistopheles is now wearing Faust's long mantle, his own clothing. Mephistopheles says, reason and knowledge only thou despise, the highest strength in man that lies. Let but the lying spirit bind thee with magic works and shows that blind thee, and I shall have thee fast and sure. Get that on camera. Okay. Again, this is Mephistopheles. He's making fun of Faust, I think, here. Faust despises now the art of reason, which he has used for so long to try and overcome this discontent, but he's obviously, like we talked about at the beginning, achieved nothing. And Mephistopheles is saying, reason and knowledge is as good as it gets for humanity. That's your highest faculty. That's all you have, basically. And so he says the spirit is going to blind him. Basically, I think Mephistopheles is implying that all he can do for Faust is give him an illusion. He can't really make him more than a person with reason. Alright, so this is another scene, another one of those really cool illustrations. They're in a witch's kitchen, and Mephistopheles has brought Faust here to get him a potion for the witch to make him look younger so that he can find love. And here, Faust is saying, I'm not really big on this witchy stuff, which, he's already made a deal with the devil. I'm not sure why getting a witch's help is that much worse, but he's saying, I'm not into it. So Mephistopheles says, so you want to try something else? He says, sure, yeah. What else do you got? And Mephistopheles says, good, the method is revealed, without or gold or magic or physician. Betake thyself to yonder field, there hoe and dig is thy condition. Restrain thyself, thy sense and will, within a narrow sphere to flourish. With unmixed food thy body nourish. Live with the ox as ox, and think it not a theft, that thou manurest the acre which thou reapest. That, trust me, is the best mode left, whereby for 80 years thy youth thou keepest. So he's like, Faust is like, what's the answer if it's not the witch's magic? And Mephistopheles says, go out and do physical labor. Eat simple, live simple, and, you'll remain young. And Faust says, no, manual labor's not really my thing. I just thought it's kind of a funny scene. He's like, go out and do physical labor. And Faust says, I guess we'll do the witch's magic, because I'm not going out and working in the field. Okay, coming back. We got quiet again. This is right after Faust says he's not going to go work in the fields. Let's do the witch's thing. And Mephistopheles is saying the witch has to make you a potion. Faust says, why can't you make me the potion? You should be more powerful than this lady. Basically, he gives a lot of reasons. He's like, I can't do it. The witch has to do it. But this was another instance where I think out of context, I actually really like what Mephistopheles is saying here. He says, not art and science serve alone. Patience must in the work be shown. Long is the calm brain active in creation. Time only strengthens the fine fermentation. To me, that really speaks to me as someone who makes art. I do music and write and all that, and time only strengthens the fine fermentation, and that's the one thing I've come to know is about the creative process is that you can't rush it. It's just, it takes time to make something really worthwhile. And that's would also be really relevant to Goethe, considering he worked on this for his entire life. He started writing Faust, I think, when he was 20 years old, and finished it shortly before he died in his 80s. So it's very relevant to. That's one thing me and Goethe have in common. Probably the only thing. Okay. In the scene at the witch's kitchen, Faust there's a mirror, a magic mirror that shows him a beautiful feminine form, and basically convinces him he needs to find a woman that will make him happy. And so then he walks outside after taking this potion that makes him younger, and he bumps into Margaret or Gretchen. She's called both those things. Gretchen is a nickname for Margaret, I discovered. I did not know that. But he's like, he bumps into this beautiful woman, and then he's like, hey, can I walk with you? And she said, I'd rather you didn't. But then he turns to Mephistopheles. He says, I must have this woman. I must possess her. And this is where Faust starts to be a bit less of a sympathetic character. It's kind of nasty. Because essentially the next scene is Faust and Mephistopheles breaking into Gretchen's room, which, it was a different time, I guess, but still pretty creepy. But this is a quote I also really liked out of context. I mean, in context it makes sense too, but just the message for me. It says, is there a magic vapor here? I came with lust of instant pleasure, and lie dissolved in dreams of love's sweet leisure. Are we the sport of every changeful atmosphere? So he's saying, now that he's in Gretchen's room, he doesn't care about just having a one-night stand anymore. He's in love with her, which he still never talked to her, so we'll put that aside. But I just love the line, are we the sport of every changeful atmosphere? He's asking about free will here. He's saying, do I really have any control over myself, over my desires, my actions, or am I just responding to stimuli? I mean, that's we still don't know the answer to that. There's no real answer to it beyond, whatever philosophical take you have. But I just really like that line. It made me think a lot. Okay. Yeah, I think I just marked this because it was another biblical reference. It says, ah, that simplicity and innocence ne'er know themselves their holy value and their spell, that meekness, lowliness, the highest graces, which nature portions out so lovingly. So Faust and Margaret are on a date, basically, and she's saying, you're so smart, you're so wonderful, what am I to you? And Faust, I think he's being manipulative here. I don't really see him as genuine. But this biblical reference, meekness, lowliness, it's the meek shall inherit the earth. So just more of Goethe's Christian background. Okay. On this chapter, my God, was some of the most beautiful writing I've ever read. So this is Faust's soliloquy after he's left Gretchen's, and he's gone into basically solitude so that he can think over the changes that have overcome him. We have more art here, and then this one on the other page. I love this one. Yeah, a little strange demon down there. Okay, so I'm just going to read this soliloquy just because it's beautiful language, just poetry. Okay. Spirit sublime, thou gavest me all, for which I prayed. Not unto me in vain hast thou thy countenance revealed in fire. Thou gavest me nature as a kingdom grand, with power to feel and to enjoy it. Thou not only cold, amazed acquaintance yieldest, but grantest that in her profoundest breast I gaze as in the bosom of a friend. The ranks of living creatures thou dost lead before me, teaching me to know my brothers in air and water and the silent wood. And when the storm in forests roars and grinds, the giant firs in falling neighbor boughs, and neighbor trunks with crushing weight bear down, and falling fill the hills with hollow thunders. Then to the cave secure thou leadest me, then showest me mine own self, and in my breast the deep mysterious miracles unfold. And when the perfect moon before my gaze comes up with soothing light around me float, from every precipice and thicket damp, the silvery phantoms of the ages past, and temper the austere delight of thought. That nothing can be perfect unto man, I now am conscious. With this ecstasy, which brings me nearer and nearer to the gods, thou gavest the comrade whom I now no more can do without. Though cold and scornful, he demeans me to myself, and with a breath, a word, transforms thy gifts to nothingness. Within my breast he fans a lawless fire, unwearied for that fair and lovely form. Thus in desire I hasten to enjoyment, and in enjoyment pine to feel desire. It's just incredible. I mean, you see your Faust has come to appreciate the beauty of life, and mostly through Margaret. But he retreats to nature here because he realizes all along that solitude has been a great gift and allowed him to, like it says, temper the austere delight of thought. Nature is a beautiful gift, he says, and he's grateful for it. And he says that nothing can be perfect unto man, I now am conscious. This again, it feels like it could be the resolution to his story. But the next thing he talks about is Mephistopheles, the comrade whom I now no more can do without. He feels that this evil, this craving, this this lawless fire has become a part of him, and he can't get rid of it. And so even in this realization of beauty and joy and solitude, the gift of nature, he's still stuck. And this last line is just so relatable to me. In desire I hasten to enjoyment, and in enjoyment pine to feel desire. It's the notion that humans can never be satisfied, because as soon as we get the thing we want, we always want the next thing. We're not built for contentment. That's what Faust is saying, and I've felt that a lot. I mean, that is maybe my favorite passage in the whole book. So next is Faust talking with Mephistopheles again. Mephistopheles comes in and finds him in his solitude. He's like, "What are you doing?" He says, he reiterates that Faust can no longer live without him. Poor son of earth, how couldst thou thus alone have led thy life bereft of me? How did you ever get anywhere without me? And he's critical of Faust here. He says, a blessing drawn from supernatural fountains, in night and dew to lie upon the mountains, all heaven and earth in rapture penetrating, thyself to godhood haughtily inflating, to grub with yearning force through earth's dark marrow, compress the 6 days' work within thy bosom narrow, to taste I know not what in haughty power, thine own ecstatic life on all things shower, thine earthly self behind thee cast, and then the lofty instinct thus, at last, I daren't say how, to pluck the final flower. Faust is saying, I don't need you anymore. You're just making things worse for me at this point. And Mephistopheles is saying, you're reaching for things that a human being on his own shouldn't reach for, that he can't have. And he says, Faust says, shame on thee. And Mephistopheles says, yes, thou findest that unpleasant. Thou hast the moral right to cry me shame at present. Faust doesn't like hearing this. He wants to believe that he doesn't need Mephistopheles, that he doesn't need this evil, lusting for, desire and enjoyment. And Mephistopheles, when he calls him out on it, and Faust says, I don't need to hear this, basically, shame on you. And Mephistopheles says, yeah, you would find that unpleasant. You don't want to hear the truth. And Mephistopheles positions himself as the giver of truth. But I just love that line, yes, thou findest that unpleasant. It kind of sums up their relationship at this point. Okay, another cool drawing. Let's see. So this is Faust and Margaret again, and Margaret is distressed because Faust is not Christian, and she's a very firm Christian. She's a true believer. So she's saying, how can I be with you if you're not Christian? She's saying, so here she says, then thou believest not, you don't believe. And Faust says, hear me not falsely, sweetest countenance, who dare express him, and who profess him, saying I believe in him, who, feeling, seeing, deny his being, saying I believe him not, the all enfolding, the all upholding, folds and upholds he not, thee, me, himself, arches not there the sky above us, lies not beneath us firm the earth, and rise not on us shining friendly the everlasting stars. Look I not eye to eye on thee, and feelest not thronging to head and heart the force still weaving its eternal secret, invisible, visible, round thy life? Vast as it is, fill with that force thy heart, and when thou in the feeling wholly blessed art, call it then what thou wilt. Call it bliss, heart, love, God, I have no name to give it. Feeling is all in all, the name is sound and smoke, obscuring heaven's clear glow. Again, just amazing language, the poetry of it. Faust here is saying, who am I to profess a belief in God? Nobody can understand it. Do you claim to understand God? And then he says here, call it what thou wilt, bliss, heart, love, God. He's saying, I don't need to believe in God to believe in this overarching holy power. I have no name to give it. The name is sound and smoke, obscuring heaven's clear glow. What's unfortunate is that I think here he's not being genuine. I think he has an ulterior motive. I think he's trying to quell Margaret's discomfort with the fact that he's not a Christian. And so he's saying, to call yourself a Christian is to say you understand God. That's, I think, what he's saying here. So he's saying, you call it whatever you want. We both believe in the same thing. Why do I have to call it God? Why do we have to use the same name? And I don't think Margaret buys it, because down here she says, thou hast no Christianity. She's like, you can, she says you talk like the preachers, but she doesn't believe his words. So, moving on, Margaret then brings up Mephistopheles, and she says that he makes her deeply uncomfortable. She can't stand him. She says down here, live with the like of him may I never. When once inside the door comes he looks around so sneeringly, and half in wrath, one sees that in nothing no interest he hath. 'Tis written on his very forehead, that love to him is a thing abhorred. Going back to this idea of evil as negation. He may try to hide it, but you can tell on his face that he doesn't believe anything has any value. And Margaret here seems to be saying that love, she says, love to him is a thing abhorred. That seems to her to be the highest good, love. And that would fall in line with Catholic or Christian theology. God is love. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And she's saying here that Mephistopheles abhors love. He sees it as something to be, a disgusting thing. And so there's another, insight. It's really interesting that Margaret is the one to give us that insight. She's saying straight to Faust, like, this is evil, your companion is evil itself. And she may not realize explicitly that he is the devil, but she can tell with her God-fearing heart in this context what he is. So this is a chapter where Margaret and Faust have indeed slept together. They've outside of marriage, so it's a very huge, shameful, sinful thing in those days. I think nowadays we're not quite as conservative as that. I mean, some people are. But her brother is a soldier. His name's Valentine. He comes to defend her honor and sees Faust approaching and goes to kill him, and Mephistopheles goads Faust into killing Valentine. Valentine's been run through with a sword, something like that, and by Faust, and Margaret comes out, and she's like, "Oh my God, my brother's dying," and he basically just shames her for throwing away her dignity and her honor. But what he says here, when shame is born and first appears, she is in secret brought to light, and then they draw the veil of night over her head and ears. Her life, in fact, they're loath to spare her, but let her growth and strength display. She walks abroad, unveiled by day, yet is not grown a whit the fairer. The uglier she is to sight, the more she seeks the day's broad light. So here he's shaming his sister. It's kind of a disgusting moment for Valentine. I mean, this is the first we're hearing of him. He basically comes home, challenges Faust to a fight, gets stabbed, and then, in his dying words, shames his sister for, bringing shame upon their family. Whatever, dude. Okay. But anyway, this monologue about shame, to me it seems it's more talking about Faust. He seems to be getting more brazen. He's still with Mephistopheles. They've become one, essentially, and he's just walking around in broad daylight with them. So the further Faust sinks down this path, the less ashamed he is of it. So that, in talking about Margaret, I feel like he's really talking about Faust. Unknowingly, of course, but still. So Margaret now is in church, and she is ashamed of what she's done. So this scene is her in the church being just accosted by an evil spirit, essentially her conscience. It says, "How otherwise was it, Margaret, when thou, still innocent, here to the altar camest, and from the worn and fingered book thy prayers didst prattle, half sport of childhood, half God within thee. Margaret, where tends thy thought? Within thy bosom, what hidden crime? Prayest thou for mercy on thy mother's soul, that fell asleep to long, long torment, and through thee? Upon thy threshold whose the blood, and stirreth not and quickens something beneath thy heart, thy life disquieting with most foreboding presence?" Forgot to mention, Mephistopheles gave Faust a sleeping potion to give to Margaret's mother, so that when he came in to do the deed with her, her mother would sleep. And her mother died from it. So basically, Margaret is blaming herself here for both her mother's death and for her brother's death, and for, the unclean act of sleeping with Faust. She's putting it all on herself. So here's what I talked about earlier, where I think this little moment humanizes Mephistopheles quite a bit to me. He's not just evil incarnate. I mean, he kind of is, but I'll just read it and then I'll explain. So Faust says, they're walking through the woods. This is a year after Margaret has been imprisoned. Faust doesn't know yet, but they're walking through the woods towards this kind of festival. It's like this pagan festival. And Faust is enjoying the beauty of nature, calling back to that moment he has by himself in the cave. And he says, "In such delight my steps would fain delay. The springtime stirs within the fragrant birches, and even the fir tree feels it now. Should then our limbs escape its gentle searches?" The woods are beautiful. The spring weather is warm and pleasant. And Mephistopheles says, "I notice no such thing, I vow. 'Tis winter still within my body. Upon my path I wish for frost and snow." And this makes me really sad for Mephistopheles, actually. It doesn't excuse his actions, but what he's saying here is that, like, all these pleasant feelings you're talking about, I don't feel them. It's still winter within my body. There's no warmth within him. And so it seems that in lieu of any kind of joy, Mephistopheles, his only option is to sow chaos and to negate good and joy and love, because he can't feel any of it for himself. And that to me is pretty heartbreaking. And then here's just more beautiful poetry about nature. Faust and Mephistopheles are following a will-o'-the-wisp to find their way through the woods. It says they're singing in alternating song here. "We, it seems, have entered newly in the sphere of dreams enchanted. Do thy bidding, guide us truly, that our feet be forwards planted. In the desert spaces, see them swiftly changing places. Trees on trees beside us trooping, and the crags above us stooping. And the rocky snouts outgrowing, hear them snoring, hear them blowing. O'er the stones the grasses flowing, stream and streamlet seek the hollow. Hear I noises, songs that follow, hear I tender love petitions, voices of those heavenly visions, sounds of hope, of love undying, and the echoes like traditions of old days come faint and hollow." There's personification in here. They talk about the crags stooping, the trees trooping, the rocky snouts snoring and blowing. And part of this could be playing into the magical kind of scene unfolding here. The will-o'-the-wisp. They're going to this giant pagan festival. Soon there will be a huge storm and witches flying everywhere. So it could be this. But it's also just I think goes back to Faust's kind of connection with nature. The trees, the crags, the rocky snouts, all these parts of nature, it likens to humans, saying that we have a connection with nature because it is like us in some way. Again, just the language, come on. It's just a beautiful little scene. Okay. This is from a chapter I did not understand. It's a satire of A Midsummer Night's Dream, Shakespeare. Goethe was shortly after Shakespeare. I don't know the exact years or dates, but Goethe is responding to Shakespeare here. And to be quite honest, I don't understand the full kind of significance of this scene. But I really liked this one kind of section here. It's someone named Skeptic, and it says, "The flame they follow on, and think they're near the treasure. But devil rhymes with doubt alone, so I am here with pleasure." Devil rhymes with doubt alone. Back again, just over and over again, evil as negation. Nothing good can come from the devil. And a lot of the characters in this kind of song, poem, whatever, in this chapter are chanting and talking about the devil as their master. But this one person, Skeptic, his character is saying, they follow the devil on, but they're never going to get anything of real value because the devil can only negate, he can only doubt. It's just a cool idea. Okay. This chapter was very interesting. So first, let's just look at this art. Just beautiful. It's disturbing, but it's gorgeous. This lithographs, is that the word? The etchings. Just incredible. roll the devilish eyes wrathfully in thy head. This chapter, Dreary Day, Afield, it changes suddenly from verse poetry to prose, which I thought was fascinating. And it makes everything feel a bit more real. It brings it down to reality. And Faust here is recognizing. So here Faust figures out that Gretchen's been in prison and she's due to be executed, and that Mephistopheles has been withholding that information from him. So he goes on this tirade. He says, "Dog, abominable monster, transform him, thou infinite spirit, transform the reptile again into his dog shape, in which it pleased him often at night to scamper on before me, to roll himself at the feet of the unsuspecting wanderer, and hang upon his shoulders when he fell. Transform him again into his favorite likeness, that he may crawl upon his belly in the dust before me, that I may trample him, the outlawed, underfoot. Not the first. Oh, woe! Woe which no human soul can grasp, that more than one being should sink into the depths of this misery, that the first, in its writhing death agony under the eyes of the eternal forgiver, did not expiate the guilt of all others. The misery of this single one pierces to the very marrow of my life, and thou art calmly grinning at the fate of thousands." He's realizing here that Mephistopheles never had his best interest in mind. The misery of this single one, he's talking about Gretchen. He's saying, how could this happen to her of all people, the one person I care about? But then he looks at Mephistopheles and he's like, you're not just grinning at the suffering of Gretchen, or my suffering for that matter. You're grinning at the suffering of the fate of thousands. Maybe he recognizes kind of the long-standingness, that's not a word, the eternity, I guess, of the perpetuity of Mephistopheles' influence. He's done this to so many people before him, and will do it to so many after. That's what Faust is saying, I think. Yeah. But again, just the switch from poetry to prose is very powerful, in my opinion. Another drawing. So they go. Faust essentially says to Mephistopheles, "We're going to break Gretchen out. We're not going to let her be executed." And they go to Gretchen's cell, and they find her, and she's gone completely mad. It's very Shakespearean. She's singing a song. Apparently, well, from what I gather is from the view of her baby, whom she drowned. She murdered her child from madness after Faust left her. She's singing this song. She says, "My mother, the harlot who put me to death, my father, the varlet who eaten me hath, little sister so good, laid my bones in the wood, in the damp moss and clay. Then was I a beautiful bird of the wood, fly away, fly away." So she hates herself for what she did. But this beautiful bird of the wood, fly away, she's kind of envisioning heaven for her child. Just hoping that something good could come out of it. But yeah, "My father the varlet who eaten me hath." And what a sinister image Faust as this Saturn figure, Saturn devouring his son. The wording here, "eaten me," is obviously not literal, but it's, Faust came in and essentially destroyed Margaret's life and left her to deal with the consequences. And now he's coming back because he wants to fix things, but you will find out that there's really nothing can be done about it. More of Margaret here. She says, "My mother have I put to death. I've drowned the baby born to thee. Was it not given to thee and me? Thee too, 'tis thou. It scarcely true doth seem. Give me thy hand, 'tis not a dream. Thy dear, dear hand, but ah, 'tis wet. Why wipe it off? Methinks that yet there's blood thereon. O God, what hast thou done? Nay, sheath thy sword at last. Do not affray me." Very Lady Macbeth here, out damned spot. There's blood on your hand. It won't come out. She's realizing that he murdered Valentine, and maybe even to some extent that he is responsible for all her suffering. It's a heavy. This is well, I'll talk about it in a minute. This is the very last scene in part one of the book. Margaret does not recognize Faust, essentially. But Mephistopheles comes in as he tells Faust, the guards are coming, we have to go. They're here to execute her, and they'll execute us too if we don't leave. And Margaret is calling out for God and for Henry, Faust's name, which doesn't really come up all that often. But Mephistopheles here says, she is judged, and the voice from above says, she is saved. Mephistopheles says, hither to me. Faust leaves with Mephistopheles, and the voice from within dying away. That's Gretchen. She calls out for Henry. That's her last words, is to call out for Faust. Just a heartbreaking scene. And here again is reiterated the powerlessness of evil and the power of God's love. I really should do more research on if Goethe was a Christian or not. There's plenty of criticism of Christianity in this book, and that's why a lot of Christians at the time didn't like it. But here at the end, he seems to be reiterating that no, the devil doesn't have any power to judge people. It's God at the end who decides if someone is saved, and that's a very affirming message. But again, we end with Gretchen being executed and Faust getting away. It's just what a heavy way to end the book, and then this last drawing here. So that's Faust Part 1. That was the quotes that I picked out. Those are my thoughts on the quotes. I really enjoyed it. Again, I think if I read it again, I'm not going to choose this translation. There's plenty of beauty and poetry in it, but I think from what I read, Goethe never intended this to be a very, high art, highfalutin these and thous. It was always intended to be in common language, read by common people, and so that's kind of what the experience I'll be searching for next is. But I love this book. I would love to, if anybody watches this video, I'd love to talk about it in the comments. Tell me anything I missed, anything you disagree with. I think I gave this book 4 stars, mostly because the translation on Goodreads, I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, mostly because the translation was a bit difficult to follow at points, but I can tell why this is a cornerstone of Western literature. It's just beautiful. Okay, well that's all for today. I'm currently reading Ulysses, which, my God, is an even bigger monster than this one, so that will probably be what I make a video on next. But let me know if there's any other books you'd like to see. Alright, have a good day. See you later.